Hello, everybody. My name is Jacquelle Horton. I'm a product manager at Google, and I am very excited to talk with the product school audience today all about how you can build that confidence for how to become a product manager, even though you don't have the technical background that you hear is necessary to do so. I have done this. I have no computer science degree. I have a business degree in entertainment and a master's in philosophy and law, so far from the engineering side, but I have maneuvered my way to the product management field. And I'll talk through how I did that, as well as things that you can do when you're in the role for how you can make sure that you have and keep that confidence of, hey, I got this. I am the product manager I know that I should be. So the TLDR is you can do it, okay? You can do it, it's possible. I'm living proof and many others are. And so let's talk through how to do that. So I'll walk through a presentation for you today. I'll present my screen now and we'll go through all the ins and outs. So, great. All right, and thank you everyone for tuning in. So, like I said, part one will be all about first, how do you establish respect as a product manager once you jump into the field? Okay. Part two will be getting the role. And of course, that comes before you establish the respect. But because that one's a little bit more tactical, I'll focus first on establishing respect when you're in the role, and then circle back to some of the tactical things around actually getting the role. But we'll cover the full spectrum here. And as I mentioned, just know that you got this. You can do this, okay? It's not unachievable. It's definitely there. It is on the, you'll hear that it's on the rarer side, or these are the people who fought through. But I feel that if you position yourself in a way that you embrace the things that you are coming with as a strong skill set and say that, hey, this fact that I don't have the technical piece is there, but here are all the ways that I'm overcoming that. That is your golden ticket. And once again, we'll dive into this, but if you know nothing else, know this slide. So part one, establishing respect as a non-technical PM. So just to take a step back and say, what are all of the things that a product manager does, okay? Walking through them, first, you need to make sure that you can uncover and define the problem. What is it that your users are struggling with that you want to build a product around to help solve, right? And so with that comes the vision. Given the fact that people are struggling with this, here are the ways that I want to put forth out into the world to figure out how to solve that problem, okay? Once you have this vision and this strategy, you need to validate that with users. Go out and talk to them and understand what it is that they are doing that you think that this will solve, and make sure that if you do build this, it will be something that actually reaches the problem that they have, right? This wasn't just something in a conference room that you came up with, or nowadays on a video call that you came up with. Once you get this validation, you likely make some tweaks and let's do here, oh, this didn't really hit, oh, we need to add this. You'll go around and evangelize this vision across your company to make sure that you have a very clear understanding of how this will hit throughout the rest of your organization, okay? And then you'll execute. You'll go with your team and you'll make sure that everything that you have set out for your vision is in fact coming true along the spectrum of the development, right? Then you'll launch, right? Start first with an experiment, likely launch, get it out there, and then learn, understand, okay, I've built this thing, here's how it's actually working in the wild. Let me build some insights on that, and then have a bunch of things that you want to do to adjust and iterate, okay? And so this is everything that a product manager does. Of course, there's a few other nuances in here, but I also wanted to mark of these things in bold what it is that you particularly play a role in for the product management lifecycle. And it's all of them, And you notice that there isn't anything on here that, oh, you have to be super technical to understand, or you do this. But every one of these is where you play a critical role, right? I will say that The execution piece is particularly where some people start getting hung up on, where they say, okay, well, when it comes time to start executing, I may not have the technical chops to understand what's going on or to advise in this. So let's dive a little bit more into that, okay? So execution is often the intimidating phase, but it's where you can really shine more, in fact, by focusing on the non-technical aspects. So how? You need in execution to make sure that you're course correcting the engineers, the designers, the testers, the researchers, everyone else, to make sure that you're actually solving the problem that you set out for, right? So rather than saying, oh, let me participate in this conversation about what technical stack we're going to use or understand how to uncover if this is the right way that we should tackle the solution. No, let others solve that. But what you need to do is say, hey, okay, it looks like you guys are exploring option A and B. If option B will in fact allow us to tackle X problem that we know is the most important thing, then great, right? You have that lens. Rather than it being the easiest or the fastest necessarily, or the one that leverages cool technology that they want to use, but rather it's something that hits the actual problem. And that's the main thing that you need to make sure that you're contributing to the thing. And that is better, in fact, if you don't have the technical expertise, because you're unbiased by what again feels easiest or smoothest or fastest, but rather what actually hits. And then you can make sure that you're reaching that product market fit, okay? But while you're on the path, there are likely some things that the engineers will say that, again, brings this intimidation factor, right? They may say, hey, this is too complex to build, okay? We need crazy thing first before we do that, okay? So this is not gonna work. And then you're like, okay, sorry, let me just go think of something else, right? But I would urge you to instead say why, right? Why do we need that thing first? Or better yet, if we were to do this, what would that look like, right? So if we were just gonna say, okay, we're gonna do this, how would we actually make that happen? So that people can instead say, okay, well, I mean, if we did wanna do it, maybe we can try to leverage this other tool or this and that. And again, you may not need to worry about what that other tool is or what the differences between the two are, but rather that you urge the team to actually find a path ahead to tackle what it is that you're setting out to. They may also say, okay, let's start with a smaller version. Okay, let's not get too crazy. Let's just start with a version. And you can say, I've thought of that. Here are a few different ways that we can tackle to get to this North Star vision I have. And I like to say a crawl, walk, run version, right? Here's a way that we can start taking baby steps toward where we're going, okay? And then we can start getting a little bit more ambitious, okay? And then we add these things. And then here's the kind of full-fledged version that has all these other things. And this one, you can see us implementing in the next quarter or two, right? This thing can happen quite fast. And then this other one may be a year, 2-year vision, but it's something that helps us continue on that same path to execute what we know is possible, right? And so this makes it far less intimidating for the engineers, but also makes sure that you're on the path to actually achieving that goal. Then my least favorite is the engineers during development saying, hey, can we cut this out? Can we get rid of this? Can we just do this, right, instead? Because don't you just want to launch? Don't you just want to get it out there? You're really going to have us do all these crazy things just for this, right? This one will happen all the time, okay? But what I would urge also here is making sure that you, frankly, ask the engineers back and say, so if we cut that out, right, do you still feel that it would solve this problem that we're trying to tackle, right? Put them in the shoes of the user and say, okay, well, if you cut this out, it's actually going to take out a key piece to the solution that we have. And so is it even worth putting something out? Because we know that this is actually not going to solve, or it doesn't really validate the core thing of what we're trying to do. It's okay to cut scope. Don't get me wrong. Cutting scope is a necessary evil in this for a product development phase, and you will need to make some of those decisions. So there will be many things that you cut. But if you find that this cut this is actually scraping too much of what the experience is, and it's actually not something that you think is valuable for users anymore, you have to really balance the speed to reach the market with the scope and the quality of what you're trying to do to make sure that that balance actually still meets a minimum bar, right? That this MVP, and be really strict about what you actually mean by your minimum viable product to get out to the world, okay? So this one will come up. It will make you feel like, oh, it's just because I don't understand how complex this is because I'm not technical, and therefore I should just listen to everything they say because they know better, and woe is me who's just trying to come in and make all these crazy ideas. No, ask the right questions, ask why back. Don't be afraid to push back a little bit and help make the engineers kind of be in the shoes for them to kind of feel a part of the solution and be a little bit more bought in to why you're pushing back and thinking how you are, okay? So the other one is that your insights power all of the technical decisions, okay? And you are the one that owns these fully. So while you may not feel that you actually have a place in these technical discussions, know that the things that you are building will be the things of impact. And your job is to just make those as powerful and clear and detailed as you can so that you equip the people who are technical to make decisions, right? So this is all around a lot of, making super detailed PRDs. And one of the strategies that I like to do for this is asking the typical questions around who, what, where, when, why, very important. And then when it comes to how, your team will help you fill that in, right? But if you can understand who your user is, what is the experience that you are going to deliver to help them solve some of their problems? When do you imagine they're going to be using your product and how frequently? Why? Why is this an important solution for you to bring to solve their problem, right? How deep is this pain? How prevalent is this? How important is it in their day-to-day lives? And then specifically how is another question I like to do to bring this a level deeper, right? Specifically, how will this interaction work? Specifically, how are they going to use this in the morning, right? And then this helps you paint a really full picture that has a very nice kind of prize and package to deliver to the engineers and others on your team to really make a story and a technical solution around making this happen. So it's applying them with as much of this kind of story and problem and details up front gives them a lot of tools where, frankly, you aren't needed in some of the technical discussions because you've given them the direction that they need. The other thing you can do to contribute to some of the technical discussions is don't go too crazy with this, but see if in your thinking, there were some future permutations or thoughts that you had that you thought this might actually be useful for, because they may actually be the ones who can say, oh, if in fact we're going to make the product look this way, we should build it in this way to start so that we don't find ourselves having throwaway code or having to change our infrastructure. And so if we think that actually it's going to be like this also, even though we're not doing that now, good to know, let me make our architecture decisions in this way, right? So again, a way for you to equip and empower. Another key thing is to very clearly define the success metrics and the things that you want to measure in order to push the validation forward, right? So why are we doing all of this? Is it to drive engagement and have people interact with the product more? Is it to drive retention and have people coming back frequently, say once a week or a couple times a month, right? Or every day, right? Is that the goal? Is it to increase reach and have this get to more people, no matter if they use it more frequently or not? We just want to get this product out to more people, right? Is it to increase satisfaction so that they feel better and can let us know that this product is actually something they're satisfied with, right? What is the actual metric that you're trying to optimize by introducing the solution for your product? And that gives the engineers a sense of, okay, I know kind of the end all be all for the product at large or for this feature. And so that helps inform some of the decisions that they need to do and some of the things that they may already, like the previous slide, not come to you to ask if they can sacrifice because they know that key thing helps bring reach actually, or this key thing is there for retention, right? So this is another help. And then of course, right, be available for all of the questions that they have. Oftentimes they just want to pick your brain and say, hey, I thought about this, or I wanted to make this call? Does this still align with your vision? And of course, don't be afraid to ask them to just say it in layman terms or whatever, right? This is something that they should also be equipped to do. But just be available for questions to, again, help course correct them throughout the execution. The other key thing you can do that has nothing to do with being technical, but is a significant value to the team, is making sure that you build, you keep, and you leverage relationships across your company and use them to empower your team to get things done. Okay, so, right, meet everyone you can, especially when you just start or you're new to a team. Just go meet people, okay, and just say, hey, I'm new to this team. I want to understand what you're working on to see how it may complement what we're doing. Would love to set up a time to chat. Be in this phase where you're doing this when you're new, again, new to a team, a project, a company, and ask these hard, dumb questions, which are not dumb. And you will get so much insight of how things are actually done, why decisions were made, what politics were there, right? Things that you were thinking of doing, but they've already done 5 times and failed. So you can get ahead of that learning, right? Or maybe they just didn't have the right this or didn't have the right that. And maybe this can be the time or timing of the market, all of these things. But ask these questions and then bring this back to your team. And I put a note here saying that this is actually often more valuable than starting right away with trying to be a PM on one of the features when you start on a new team, because people feel like, okay, especially because I'm not technical, I have to prove my value and prove my worth. But it's actually not something that you need. This is far more valuable for you to gain a bunch of insights from across the company that will power and speed up you making decisions for products ahead than you saying, okay, from day 2, I'm going to lead this effort, right? That's not something that you should strive to do. Just be a sponge, get a bunch of info, get a bunch of contacts and connects, network, and take this back to your team so that when you need to collaborate with somebody or you need to understand if you can leverage a certain tool that you actually know another team has been thinking about and working on, or you're thinking of this, but you know that this other team actually has that or has been thinking about that, and you can smooth things out before you try to launch that, right? All of these things are again, have nothing to do with let's understand how the algorithm works, but rather how you can leverage relationships, right? And then again, once you need this, you have all the leverage in the world because you've met everyone and you know them. So I'll just kind of summarize this section with, you're far more effective when you actually don't get too involved in the technical decisions, okay? And you focus on the product leadership. This is what you uniquely bring, and this is where you should focus. And you should not feel that because you don't know this other thing that they're doing, or you don't understand what this means, that you don't belong or you're not good enough. In fact, there's a reason why you don't understand them, because you're so good at the other things, right? And they lean on you for those, right? And so if you focus on developing a strong vision, evangelizing that vision, making the right connections, and giving the team what they need in the details and the storing and the feeling and the users to execute that vision, you're golden, and the rest will follow, okay? So all of this was around, once you're in the role, how do you make sure that you feel empowered? Now I want to take a step back and say, how do you even get these roles, right? How do you get the role if you don't have this technical background, if you don't have a CS degree, if you don't have this, right? So there's multiple paths to becoming a product manager if you have no technical experience, okay? And I'll talk through a few of them. One is a program manager, okay? This is where I started with, okay? I came from the business side of Google. That's where I started. And I started on the support team, being the one to look at the help center and write help center articles about how to solve a problem. As you can imagine, that served me very well because I actually understood all of the things that were wrong with the problem and what people were plagued with, and invited me even more to become a product manager and try to solve these things for them, right? So that served as a huge benefit. Then I went to the development side of the business and helped people understand how to grow their channels on YouTube. I started YouTube. And then from this, I switched to program management, which is all around running the operations and the processes behind how a team executes, which allowed me to understand how to make things more efficient and be a confidant for a lot of people and understand all the ins and outs, make great relationships, right? This is where I built all of this. And then only then did I transfer to product management. But all of these things on the business side, on the program management, served me exponentially well. And frankly, better than a lot of people who only come in through the product management route. So embrace the fact that you are coming with so many different hats that you will use as a product manager, okay? Others are researchers who have a keen sense of user understanding and then want to transition into product management to take action on that. Others are product specialists who help coordinate things on the business side and communicate with other people across the company, like PR and again, the help center and all of these things to make sure that they're executing well. And you also have a great insight of product there. Product support, like I discussed, business development, understand how to build relationships outside of the company. You have to have a keen understanding of product strategy, right? Taking a step back and looking at the big picture of how this strategy actually impacts the broader business. Data analyst, right? Knowing the numbers, and you got to know the numbers as a product manager, and having that as another hat that you use can be of huge help, and others, right? So I have seen concrete and very successful examples across all of these different roles that have transitioned into product managers. And they're some of the best product managers that I know. So if not one of these roles that you're starting with, there are plenty of others. All you need is to just make sure that you equip yourself with some of the key things that are needed around strategy, decision-making, talking to users, being keen, great presentation. All of these things will equip you into being the role. So how do you get some of these tips, right? I would make sure that as much as you can, try to gain some experience upfront to make conversion easier. How do you do this? There are online courses, right? Like the one you're in now, Product School. They have great resources to help you understand this kind of fuzzy world of product management and unpack that and demystify it, right? So sign up for these courses to help you gain some of these insights. A 20% project, as we call it in Google, which is spending 20% of your time, say a Friday, to dive into another project at your company. Of course, not all companies would allow this, but even if you can hack this somehow and say, hey, can I just help here, spend a few hours here to do this? This can be something that you can do. Frankly, you can even do this at home, right? If you say, okay, I'm gonna try to put myself in the shoes of a product manager and build this side project that I have, right? Just get yourself thinking of these ways. This experience is the best that you can give yourself. And doing one of the core duties, as I mentioned on the last slide, all of those different roles are things that you can do to say, hey, I know that this is one of the things that a product manager does. Let me do that thing deeply, become an expert in that, like research, and then take this and say, hey, I'm already accelerated here. All I need to pick up are these other things, but don't worry, this one I'm good, and I'll kind of leverage and build my career off of that. Such a great way to do this. What I did, right, is a 6-month rotation program where while I was a program manager, I said, let me go 6 months and be a product manager, gain a portfolio of things that I've launched and visioned and executed, and then use all of this to get a bunch of recommendations from engineers to say, hey, no, she can survive in conversations, she's good, right? To get all of this validation and evidence and then say, hey, make me a product manager, right? So whatever this looks like, where you are at your company, if they don't have formal programs like this, see if you can make one, be the first, right? That's fine too. And make sure that you can push these types of things forward because you want to and you have that conviction. And again, kind of similar to hacking the 20% project, just ask somebody if you can help with a small effort. If it's, hey, I have seen that a lot of users are asking for this feature, but I know you guys have all these other things on your plate. What if I took on seeing how we can develop this and you give me, 10%, 20% of one of your engineers' time just to bounce off ideas and how we can execute. And let me just vision, let me build a PRD, let me talk to some people to see how to unpack this. That alone, spending a week doing that, or a month, right, is going to give you so much more experience that you can leverage and understand, hey, is this actually what I want to do? Is this something that I can do? And that will build you relationships and get you seen across the company as, okay, wait, maybe she has some tops. Maybe he knows what he's doing, right? And this will give you so much more leverage than coming from scratch, right? And saying, yeah, I'm curious about it. Can you put me in the role? Just get that experience, however way you can manage. And when you are at a point when you're preparing for interviews to enter the product management role, study, 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 okay? So especially at these big tech companies, they have a very kind of particular format for how they do it. And some of these categories are four: strategy, analytical, design, and our favorite, technical. So the strategy one is around, how can you think of putting yourselves in, say, the shoes of a CEO and making big decisions around whether or not you would adjust company revenue if some situation happened, or how you would react if some competitor did something, these kind of big strategic questions. Analytical is understanding how your mind works and kind of calculates things, like questions around, how much revenue does a airline make on advertising every day? And if you were to introduce, a brand to come and advertise, what would you walk them through and how much money would you ask them to spend, right? These kind of calculations are some of the questions there. Design is around understanding your creativity. How much do you think out of the box? How 10x can you get? How 100x can you get? How much do you first think about the user and then go into solutions rather than just start with the solutions there, right? And then technical is how well versed are you in understanding technical discussions and how things actually work behind the scenes in this. So this is where I would suggest you, first of all, not stress out, okay? There is a book called Cracking the PM Interview that I would completely suggest that you look at, right? And I would also say, look no further, right? Just get this book, Cracking the PM Interview. It gives a very clear articulation of what you need to do in order to be successful at these types of interviews. And I think if you read these chapters, I think it even divides it into these categories, you will be fine. You will understand what the interview is about. They have very good, formats for what you can do to use to break down questions and understand, okay, how am I going to talk about this topic for 20 minutes? It really gives you an understanding of what to do. This is a whole another topic that we can talk about, is the interview process. But this is a great resource that I personally leveraged. And then the other thing I would say is, often because you're stressed out about this technical interview, you neglect the others because you're like, okay, it's okay, I have those ones. Let me just focus on this technical piece. And that's not that's not the right strategy, because you're gonna be like, okay, maybe at the technical because you're non-technical, and then you might still be okay on the other ones. Then you have a meh interview. No, be outstanding at the other three, and then be meh and like, okay, you know what? But she was so great here. It's okay. She'll survive, right? But then just make sure you don't neglect the rest. What I also did was watch videos on YouTube about how algorithms work. What are the typical interview questions that people get, right? I'm a visual learner. This worked very well for me, but just another note that there's a ton of resources out there for you to leverage. Some people go as far as taking a course at Stanford or on intro to computer science or something, right? And I was planning to do this, but I said, let me just see what's out there already. And again, things like Product School and so many other things, right, can give you these insights of how you can start thinking of the technical ways. And I would say allow, at minimum, several weeks and ideally a couple months to start diving into the things that you need to study, okay? And this is really where you can kind of calmly take the time to understand how to unpack. And for this technical interview, what is it that they're actually looking for? Your goal is to demonstrate technical literacy, okay? It sounds intimidating, but there's a couple ways that you can do this without actually being technical, right? One of the things, and this is where I spent a lot of time in the videos, is explaining how to form an algorithm, okay? And what this means is just when you hear a problem, okay, when you hear a challenge, you just need to say, here's how I would make that happen. And this is in layman terms. You just think logically, okay, if I were to try to come up with a solution for this problem, how would I do this, okay? So for example, if there's a question saying, if you were to build an algorithm that had you take an array of random numbers and find pairs, matching numbers within them, how would you do that? It's like, but it would just be, okay, so how would you do this if you weren't a computer? You would perhaps look at the first number, scan the rest of the list, see if any number there matched that first number, bring that next to it, right? Say you have a 2, you look for another 2, 5, 0, 8, 7. Oh, here's a 2. You bring that 2 over here. Then you move on to the next. Okay, now I have an 8. Okay, look for an 8. Oh, found an 8. Bring it over here, right? And that's what you need. That's how algorithms are built. That's what the computer would need to do. And that's also how you would approach it, right? And so once you start unpacking, like, okay, how would I just do this thing? It really starts giving you this intro of how you would be able to answer some of these questions, okay? Sometimes you may not even get a question as deep as this. You may, right? And you should be ready to answer something like this. But you may also want to practice, okay, how does my project work technically, right? How does my project unpack? How does it work on the back end, right? What's the technical stack look like? And ask one of your engineers, ask somebody who you know who can maybe take something that you're working on and explain how it works technically, and have that in your toolbox ready to go, so that if you need to whip something out around this, you can already take something that you're familiar with on other aspects and leverage this on the technical side as well. If you aren't working on something currently that's technical, take a project or a product out in the world that you like and understand how that works technically, right? How does Twitter work? How does WhatsApp work? And in fact, I would even have, and I have this as the last one, understand how some of these bigger products work, because you may be asked that. If you were to build a product like Facebook for dogs, how would you do it? So if you understand how Facebook works, right, how do all these nodes and connections happen and this and that, then you would be able to unpack this quite clearly. So I would have in your toolbox your project, how it works, other projects that are interesting to you, and some of these bigger technical sites and how they work, to understand how to do it, while also understanding how you can understand certain algorithm types, but also just think logically about whatever problem it throws at you. Just explain it as a layman, right? And this last thing I'll say here is be transparent about your skills. There's no follow-up needed here or details. It's just be transparent up front with the recruiter, with the interviewer, and everyone that, hey, I don't have a technical background here. Is there anything that you would suggest that I do for this technical interview to make sure that I'm still set up for success, right? Or, is there any way to kind of adjust this, because I know I'm strong on the other aspects, right? But I want you guys to be aware of this up front so that you don't throw some other crazy question to me, right? But go in with this so that they aren't disappointed in the interview, thinking that you may have something that you don't, and that's kind of worst case. And best case, they will help adjust. They'll say, okay, good to know. So in fact, why don't we test these other skills, or why don't we give you a second interview on this or this, right? And so just going in there with that set expectation is far more helpful than trying to say, okay, I'm going to become an expert on this. Just be transparent, okay? So I'll wrap up with a couple takeaways. One is, as you saw from my talk, just embrace being non-technical. Use this as your superpower, in fact, and be delighted at the fact that you aren't kind of bogged down or bothered by these other things that may serve as distractions, but you can empower and push through things that you know actually will matter to the user. They will not be so aware of the fact that they built this on this certain technical stack, but they will be aware that this actually solves a problem that they've been struggling with. And so if you pay more attention to that and lead your team with that direction, you will be far more valuable than understanding how computer science works, okay? And just make sure that when you are preparing for these things, you do embrace the technical side. You get these different things that I said to add to your toolbox, but please trust that this is just a means to an end, okay? And that end is something that you are already equipped to do. You've gotten the experience. You know in your gut this is what you want to do. You're here listening to this thing and you have that drive. And so just know this is just to get you over the hump. But in reality, day to day, you won't really be using these skills that they test in the interview. It's just to make sure that you are there, level set, ready to go and have these conversations with them. But rather your value is more, and in fact, the other things that you bring as a non-technical PM. So with that, thank you so much for listening. I wish you the best. Understand this is possible. There's so many people who are living proof of this, and you will soon be one of them. So congrats in advance. And please, if you have any questions, I know there will be discussion during this webinar. And if there's anything else you want to follow up with me, my email is here, Jacquelle@google.com. And go out there and be great. Thank you so much.